All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's town hall. Today we have the town hall number 14, and we do have a couple of interesting topics that we need to talk about today because there are plenty of things going on, a couple of things are brewing, and we're sitting at the 14th town hall already. Man, this is literally insane. So we do have three big topics that we need to talk about today. The first one actually is we need to talk about this new chip from Bitmain, the BM1370. After that, I want to invite Crypto Eyes onto the stage because we need to talk a little bit more about solar, and we actually need to get rid of this stupid idea that you can actually use an MPPT charge controller, plug in a solar panel to it, and then use this plain power just to provide it to your miner, which might be able to function, but let's get back to reality, it doesn't, and I want to talk about this. It's literally a bummer that some people think that, well, whatever. And last but not least, we actually need to talk about, yeah, I got a reality check. Thanks for that, Crypto Eyes in the chat. Last but not least, we need to talk about new channels that we do have, such as the Lightning channel and a couple of other things that are brewing here in this community. Again, for all of those of you who are in this town hall stage here, thanks for being here, thanks for joining in, thanks for having the time. For those of you who might be Germans and are interested in the football games, I'm sorry, but literally I don't really care because I don't watch football. So it is what it is. We do have a lovely time here to actually be on the town hall and a couple of things to talk about. So first things first, we want to talk about the BM1370, and I want to spread a little bit of conspiracy theories. Scott, do you have a second? Do you mind coming on top of the stage and talking with me about it? Also, McFighter, maybe you're interested in it. And I literally would like to get a little bit more conspiracy theory on the BM1370 because there are things going on and it's interesting. So let me start on the beginning of all these ASIC chips, like not on the actual beginning, but we have created the Bitaxe Max with the BM1397. After that, we've actually created the Ultra with the BM1366, and then the Supra with the BM1368. And this is basically the order of how they are actually created. The max version reached an average hash rate of roughly 340 to 400 gigahash per ASIC chip, which is not that bad. After that, we had the S19 chip, which does have an average of 425 to 450 gigahashes if you do use them with these average numbers. And then we have the chip that we do use in the Supra, which is basically the S21 chip. But apparently, Bitmain fucks us all again, and now they do have a new chip with way more hash rate in the S21 XP. And there are a couple of things that are going on and a couple of people thinking different things here in this community. And I want to just, I want to lit up this fire and spread a little bit conspiracy theories on what's going on there. And that's what I'm going to do. Just a quick disclaimer here before we actually do that. So I'm sitting here in a hotel room. I do hope that the internet connection is alright, that you can hear me loud and clear and everything is alright, because I think like the sound quality is probably not the best, but it should be alright. Whatever, just a little bit here for information of you. Whatever. So, as I said, these different ASIC chips are interesting, and we have a form factor of probably 18 by 18 millimeters. Don't actually mind me on my poor measurement doing of ASIC chips, but yeah, these usual ASIC chips that we do use are really tiny. They're not really that big, and having an average of roughly 600 gigahashes on one die is insane with the S21 chip. And now Bitmain released the S21 XP, which does have way less ASIC chips per hash port, but way more hash rate in total terms, which creates a little bit of theories about what's going on, what's brewing in there, why is it actually the way it is. And what most of the people do think is that the actual die on the ASIC must be way bigger. Like the ASIC that we do have with the die itself is way smaller than the actual ASIC chip. The die is only this silvery part in the middle. That's actually the die. The rest is just for having connections to the pins and so on and yada yada. You probably get it. And the BM1370 needs to be bigger to actually accomplish this, because from what I've heard from Altair Tech, they did a post on X about it, that Scott is writing, the BM1370 is in the S21 Pro, which was announced in March and just started shipping. Interesting. It also is in the S21 XP, isn't it? Or are we just talking about the Pro? So if I got this wrong here, I'm sorry, please excuse me. Things are happening quickly here and sometimes you get confused, or whatever. So what I was about to say is, with the BM1370, you can't actually get this much hash rate out of a die if it would be the same size as all these other ones that we have seen yet. And Altair Tech was posting about this, especially they were posting about it with a look on the firmware and on the software from the web UI, where you actually can see the count of ASIC cores or ASIC units or chips that you do have per hash board, which is quite interesting. So apparently this means that they do use way less chips but produce way more hash rate, which, I mean, as an answer means to you, all right, these chips must be the super holy grail of ASIC chips that they have ever created. And subsequently, I think it's just a bigger die. Like, you need to crank in more cores to get more hash rate out of this in order to actually get more hash rate from this ASIC chip. So it does make sense to create a bigger one, which is also the answer to more of these issues that we do have in all terms, not just speaking about ASIC chips, but also CPUs and stuff like this. We've seen smaller CPUs, but at some point you need to scale up the whole thing instead of just one part. At some point you're that low into the nanometer section that you cannot actually increase it anymore unless we do have some new sort of physics, but apparently I think we don't. So subsequently, you need to increase the die size to pack in more cores and therefore getting more hash rate or more computational power out of one single chip. So that's quite interesting, and I'm really eager to figure out, and I do hope that somebody of this community will receive an S21 Pro very soon so that we can actually tear this one down and take a look on the ASIC, because, I mean, it needs to be at least twice the size of these actual ones that we do have. Yeah, and Crypto Eyes is posting in the chat, I need wet wipes. All right, so he was posting about the S21 XP Hydro, which, let's see this, has 473 terahash at 5.6 kilowatt. Man, this is plenty of power usage. Yeah, that's an interesting one, and that's probably an issue if you're trying to do that with solar, but we'll dive into that in just a second. So Crypto Eyes, please hold back. We're gonna get into the solar section. All right, so apparently, speaking about all those different namings and these naming schemes that Bitmain does have, it's basically the same as you do see that with Intel or AMD or any producer of your TV that you do have at home. Take a look on the serial number of any of your devices. Usually it's shit, and I'm not really sure who the heck is actually doing the serial naming of devices. It doesn't make sense in any way, but whatever. PMAXUW was writing, maybe they produce in 2 nanometer instead of 4 nanometer. And Scott replied to that, I've heard that the BM1370 is 3 nanometer, which could be the case. I mean, Block is trying to produce chips in the 3 nanometer section, and it would be amazing if Bitmain actually have managed to do that. But I'm not really that deep into the section of how much of an increasement can you actually get in the same die size if you lower the nanometers producing samples by 1. I'm not really sure if this actually provides you 40 to 70% more hash rate at the same size. I think maybe it's something in between, a little bit bigger die and the reduction of the nanometer processing of the actual production. That would be interesting. I mean, we'll figure it out. It's just a matter of time, right? Because we will get these units, and then as soon as we do have them, we love to tear them down and break them, usually. I mean, it's a clear process of how you need to do it because it's proprietary hardware and we all hate it, right? At some point, maybe. Well, whatever. So yeah, that's basically the thing about this new chip, and it's going to be interesting. It needs to be some new thing, and I really hope that we can use that in a new one, and we probably will do use this in a new one. So apparently, probably a new Bitaxe variant is coming along, and to be fair, in my honest opinion, and this is just my opinion, we do have a little bit of confusion in this community. We have the Bitaxe, which is the Bitaxe, and then we have the Ultra, the Supra, the Hex, and I do get it. People get confused. Naming schemes are hard, but at least we don't have some numbers in it. We use naming schemes, which is better than this weird stuff that your TV producer or manufacturer is actually doing. And let's see. Scott wrote 2040 cores apparently. Oh man, that's interesting. We're sitting at 1,600 something cores currently at the BM1368, right? Something like 1,600 cores, I believe, in the BM1368. I'm not really sure about that. I mean, I would need to look it up, but this means there's not really that much of an increasement of these actual cores. Yeah, Scott's quickly going to check that. While he's doing that, I'm going to invite Crypto Eyes onto the stage. And by the way, guys, town halls are usually for you. It's your place for getting news about OSMU and what's currently going on in the hardware section of mining. Like I don't cover any of these shitty news about if the price is going up or down, whatever, doesn't matter. But we matter about hardware, which is specifically needed to talk about. So therefore, yeah. If you do have any questions, whatever, like if you have an issue with a Bitaxe, whatever, just join into the town hall. Town halls are bi-weekly at 9 p.m. German time. And yeah, you need to figure out what time this is if you do live in another country. But yeah, just raise your hand. I bring you up on stage and let's chat. These town halls are always for you. All right. So, Crypto Eyes, welcome on the stage.
Good evening, everyone. How you doing?
Lovely to have you here. All right. So, for those of you who are not aware about Crypto Eyes and why it's needed to have him here on the stage and talk with him about it, please do yourself a favor. Take a look on the Solar channel and just scroll through it and get a little bit educated about solar and what's going on, because we do have plenty of people who actually do have knowledge about solar and how this actually would work and how we could make something like a solar Bitaxe happen. But it's not that easy as you might think it would be, especially with having issues with clouds, or there's something called like day and night, there could be an issue. And
Overcast.
yeah, the forecast is also an issue. Like it's never what it's supposed to be. But whatever. We need to talk about solar, and I apparently had the opportunity to actually get into solar a little bit. So I bought myself a MPPT charge controller from Rickton. I bought myself as well a small 12 volt 7 amp hour battery, and I plugged everything up as well with a solar panel, obviously, onto this charge controller and tried to run my Hex off of it. And there are a couple of issues with it. It is working, and you need to modify a little bit on the software side, a couple of things, but that's not really an issue. That's just 2 lines and then it works. But yeah, getting into solar is not that easy, especially if we talk about the investment that you need to use in order to get the hardware. Like you need to have solar panels, you need to have batteries, a charge controller, a controller or inverter. Yeah, an inverter it's called. So things add up, and then you need a device for it if you're talking about big stuff like Crypto Eyes is doing. But yeah, whatever. Crypto Eyes, would you love to share with us quickly what kind of solar setup you do have and what you do use it for?
The big setup or
the big setup? Yeah, the big setup.
The current big setup, which is a pilot project, consists of 8 kilowatts of solar array to 8 kilowatt MPPT charger, an 8 kilowatt inverter, and a 7 times 2.4 kilowatt battery pack, which is about 16 or whatever it is, usable 16 kilowatt hours battery storage. All of it off grid, and that ties basically all the man cave.
Partly off grid, right?
It's completely off grid. It's got a backup facility to, if it all goes pitong and it runs out of juice, it can switch to the mains and start charging and using the mains. But the setup is off grid. So the mains cable is connected on the inverter's standby generator feed. So it thinks it's a generator if it runs out of power. It's just there in emergencies because my office in the man cave is also connected on the solar. So if it does run out of juice, I would like to keep my office running. So it's not used very often. It's rare. But there has been the odd night that I forgot to switch off the miners and I was messing about and run out of power. But it's seamless. It will automatically transfer when the battery voltage drops. So you just hear click and it gets my attention because I hear the MPPT chargers charging. And that system is also being used for a lot of the OSMU Bitaxe sort of early day immersion testing. And that's the big stuff, pretty much.
Yeah, what kind of miners do you use? Like you do have 8 kWh of solar and roughly 8 kWh of battery capacity. What miners do
No,
you run them?
the batteries are bigger. The batteries are whatever the math is, 7 batteries times 2.4,
yeah,
like
24.
16 kilowatts. It's 24 in total, but the usable is like 16, 17. Miners I've run, I've tried an S19K. I've tried they're pretty much all the same family / power consumption. So they've all been at about the 4K. When I calculate them, they're about 4 kilowatts because mine are immersed as well. So by the time I add pumps and air coolers and routers and XYZ, I do the math based on 4K. They don't burn that much, but so I've tried an X19K, an XP, and 3 days ago, I put the S21, let's say the plain S21, feels old now, into the immersion tank, and actually I've been so far quite impressed with it. Mind you, depends where you live. I'm in London, in the UK, and there's not the right weather for solar here. I mean, with 8 kilowatt solar, even today, I had full batteries at 9 a.m. and throughout the whole day, I could not maintain a positive charge from the solar out of 8 kilowatts. So the miner at 4 kilowatts, or say 3.67, 3.6, 3.7 for the miner. And by the time I put my equipment, I'm about 4.1. So about 4 kilowatts, I was losing the battle. So currently I'm at 22% battery at, what is it now? 8:30 p.m. So you need a lot more solar than you think, even if you live somewhere.
I mean, living in Texas would be alright. Like they do have plenty of sun.
They do, but it's the sun. I mean, the sun is there, but whether you got high stratus clouds or cirrus clouds that's blocking half of it. And my lesson for the second farm that we're designing now for the solar, it's going to be way overkilled. So the plan is to have a 15 kilowatt inverter to be able to take 4A6, pretty much. But the solar will be in excess of 20. That's the plan. So, but I'm still to decide. It might go down to 10 for the charger, but then the solar will be about 18. Just because I learned that it's much required to overspec the solar if I'm looking for 4, I need to have, I mean, I've got 8 at the moment, and that's not covering it on any day that's not clean. So
yeah, now we're basically speaking or talking about the big setup, like with actual
it's the
machines.
same with the small one. I
Yeah,
mean, the same
that's
you
the thing. That's
experienced
what
the
I
same when
was
you
about
came
to
to
say.
mine. Yeah,
You can apply this
it's the
one to
same
one to
principle.
smaller ones, right?
Yeah. So the trial that I did with the Bitaxe originally, just for the Bitaxe with a 20-watt panel, would work fine. I mean, the panel was pushing out on the perfect conditions on a nice sunny midday. I was getting about 18 watts out of the panel. Bitaxe was putting 13, so we were net positive, giving the battery a bit of juice. But 10 minutes later, when I'd pop back out and it's still sunny and the sun's moved a little bit, I was down to 15 watts on the solar panel. Give it another half an hour and I was at the Bitaxe levels. That's why I decided for the baby version to do the tracker, to basically try and maximize the output of the solar panel by tracking the sun. Alternatively, I would have to hugely overspec. I'll probably go to your size of panel at 100 watts to be able to have less input on power over a longer period of day without moving the panel.
Yeah, so I do have a 100-watt panel and a 12-volt 7 amp hour battery, and then the hex, which usually pulls on the DC side. Not so. I try to achieve this
So
with DC only. I don't want to do any switching over to AC and then back to DC, because then you do have way too many loss. I tried to did this
that
with,
we don't,
yeah.
we don't have that argument on the small stuff. The big stuff, yes, but neither X that I've made, the small one tracker, or what you're making is that's DC to
I
DC.
mean,
But
what I've tried first before I actually order myself this MPPT charge controller and the solar panel and the battery. I tried to use my solar setup that I currently do have, which is basically just a really tiny power station. They are really common these days, with a solar panel which can roughly produce something like 50 watts at the highest. And then the battery inside is something like a 200 watt-hour battery. It's not really that high. And the biggest issue for this converter, this power station, is I do have so much loss when I do convert from the battery DC back to AC, then going from the AC outlet to a converter to DC and then into the hex. I was roughly having a loss of over 30 to 35%, just because this specific unit that I do have is just
yeah,
so
they're not
crappy
built.
it wouldn't work. It was
Yeah,
a bummer.
they're not built really for that. They're like just built for your emergency rear of the car, take it to the park kind of thing. Um, and
Yeah, it's a
it's the
really
same.
tiny one. It
All
just
all
weighs
the
like 5
MPPTs,
kilos.
yeah, all the MPPTs in principle, or chargers, inverters as such, work more efficiently. Apparently, the higher they work on their range. So they like to be close to their max to be as efficient as possible because that's where they're designed. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's a learning curve. You experience it yourself. It'd be interesting to get Scott up if you don't mind, if he's available, because we were
Yeah,
discussing
I'm
about
not sure about Skull. Like, I mean, the whole idea about running your biddings off of solar. I mean, maybe
well
Scott
the
has
boys.
something else to
Oh,
do, but the
I was
whole
bringing up
idea.
about the cap.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it at the first episode of BidX 101. So if you guys are listening to this later on, or for those of you who are currently listening to this live here, we do have a series called BidX 101, where we do go over basically every step, every information that you do need about the BidX. And the very first video was an interview with Scott, where we actually talked about the history of the BidX. And he mentioned like his whole idea was to get actually a
Day
do-it-yourself
miner.
miner and then use solar. And therefore, the original name for this whole project was not BitX, it was actually day miner, because you only can
Day miner.
mine during the day with solar. But apparently, 2.5 years later, we still don't have a miner that actually just runs straight from solar, because it has way more challenges to it than you do
Well, we
think.
do, technically
Yeah,
speaking.
but we use
It's
batteries.
well, yeah, it's still day miner. I mean, we the original concept didn't specify what, how, and what hardware. It just
So
said
I
run the
mean,
day.
just for a comparison, I do have this 100-watt panel in my garden, which at the highest produces 80 watts, and I have this 12-volt 7 amp hour battery, which gives me, what is it, roughly 96 watt hours of capacity. And then I do have two BitX running on this. So I do use from the output of the MPPT charge controller, I use the output into a buck converter to get it down to 5 volts, and then actually feed a BitX and the NerdX. That's what I'm currently running. And during the day, they start up somewhat at like 11 a.m. because the orientation of my garden is not the best. It's somewhere in southwest orientation, and I have trees and stuff like this. So I need to wait till noon to actually get plenty supply of solar in it to charge the battery, because my battery output only provides power as soon as the batteries are full. I don't actually start outputting any power if they're not full. And then I maintain six to
Explain
six
why.
and a half. Yeah, 1 second. I do that in a second. So then I do maintain 6 to 7 hours of mining per day just off solar. So these devices that I have plugged in there are not seeing the AC unit ever again. So,
Just
and
for
you want
people
me
to
to explain why do you choose what
yeah,
I...
tell them about your voltage drop issue. Why
Yeah,
you
okay.
had
So the
prices
original
for.
idea that I had, and initially it was working, but then I had issues. So the Bitaxe hex uses the TPS 546, I believe. Uh, Maybe it's another one. Please correct me if I'm mistaken
Five.
about this. Well, whatever. So it does use a
Yeah.
buck converter down from 12 volts to the appropriate amount that we do need for all these voltage domains on the hex. So 2 times 1.2, we're sitting at 2.4 volts that we actually do put out there. And we have 3 voltage domains. So the thing is, theoretically, this buck converter could have a input voltage up to 18 volts, but it's limited in the software, and I wasn't aware of that. I was just using it. I charged my battery, I plugged in the hex, and initially the battery was not fully charged, so it was sitting at like something 12 to 12.5 volts or 13 volts, something like that, and the hex was fine with that. But as soon as the sun hits the solar panel and it was charging the battery and having enough power for the hex at the same time, I reached a voltage level of over 14 volts, and then the hex was shutting off. And I was not aware of why. Like I was really confused because I was taking a look on the data sheet of this device and I was like, it should be running. Why is it not? And then, yeah, Ben, I believe Ben was it, who actually pointed it out to me that the input
Yeah,
voltage is
yesterday.
what?
Yesterday, you figured out because
Yeah,
we were trying to figure out the Victron why you were losing power up high,
yeah,
and
correct. So we
we
were talking
basically
about this yesterday in the general voice chat,
so
and I
everybody to
was,
get if they want to get technical nerdy, give me 1 second to explain. So any charger when it charges the battery has a thing called a float voltage. So on the Victron, the float voltage basically is the voltage it's going to squeeze out of the its own charger to dump into the battery. It's 14.2 volts. Now, a 12-volt battery will be between 11 point some change when it's empty and close to 14 and a few, or high end of 13 volts when it's fully charged, depending on the battery. But the charger will always push out a little bit higher until it realizes the battery reaches that float voltage, and then it will start taping off um, the voltage. But that's not going to be shown until the battery gets 75-80% closer to that number, whereas Lara said, when the solar brings more voltages in, it will spike the overall power on the rail to about 14.2, and that was, what is it, 2.2 volts more than you found in the software that cuts
no,
the
no.
hex out.
So the Bitaxe is fine with an input
That's
voltage.
fine,
So
yeah.
currently the firmware specifies this to an input voltage of up to 14.0 volts. But as you explained right here, I was hitting this float value of 14.2, and therefore the hex was shutting off. So it's not an issue of the hex. It's just an issue of me not being aware of this fact that you can actually program the TPS with software. So I just changed it, and now it's working. So that's not an issue. But yeah, that's just one example of many that you could encounter when you're trying to do something like actually getting your solar system running. I mean, in theory, it's super simple and it works. You just need to be aware of that there are many things that are counting in there. Bad days, clouds are coming along.
500 variables.
Pardon?
500 different variables you can't account for or
Yeah,
predict.
especially like we had a couple of weeks or months back, we had this conversation here in OSMU where some people were actually thinking that you could run your Bitaxe from plain solar with maybe 1 or 2 capacitors in between. I mean, maybe if you're living somewhere in Texas and to see a cloud once a day, but if you're living in UK or in Germany, that's not going to work. Like your device is going to be shutting off, shutting on all the time. So let me see. Solo Satoshi is writing something in chat. Are there any plans for Bitaxe to quit utilizing Bitmain chips? Unsure if this has been talked about before, just curious. If so, what does such a move look like? How easy, hard is it? What tools need to be utilized to do so?
Mm.
I mean, okay, so we do have Before we dive back into the solar section, let me quickly answer this one. So we do have one channel which is called the Watts miner. So for a period of time, which is really long, we had the idea of actually taking the chips from the Watts miner to get them working with a Bitaxe derivative, or they're called a Watts miner. I mean, I'm not really sure if anybody's taking a look into that. I do know for sure that Scott is really busy with all the work on the software side and other things, as well as plenty other people, as McFighter, for an example. He's also really busy with all the Hex stuff. I mean, Hex is usually done. Like we just need to wait for the approval from the prototyping. That's it. And yeah, moving away from Bitmain chips is hopefully something that will happen, but I'm not seeing it happen in the next couple of weeks, because if I'm aware of that, or I would be aware of that if anybody is working on a Watts miner, but apparently nobody is. So it's a matter of time until anybody of the core team devs, I'd say, here that are working on the Bitaxe do have plenty of time to actually rip off a Watts miner ASIC chip and get that up and running. Or somebody else is joining in here who does take all this knowledge that we do have already provided here for the Bitaxe and just stick it over to the Watts miner, which would be cool. So I highly encourage everybody of you who is listening to this, especially later on, if you do want to tinker around, why not try it with the Watts miner? I mean, apparently the steps should be the same as with these Bitmain chips, but I think what most of us are currently waiting for is this holy grail of the block open source ASIC that most of us are currently waiting for, because we don't really want to spend more time on all this proprietary hardware. Sure, we do see all these new chips as the S21, S21 Pro chips, and so on, and we're trying our best to actually get them and fit them onto a Bitaxe device to utilize them, but we can't call as 100% open source. We have published all the data that we do have about the Bitmain chips, but it's still not the fully taste of being the open source maxi, if you do understand what I'm talking about. I hope this kind of answers the question that you do have. It should, I hope. Yeah. All right. So let's dive back into this talk about that you use your Bitaxe device with a solar panel, which is, it's just beautiful. It's just like, I don't know the correct wording for this, but it is addicting. I had one solar panel. Now I do have two, and I ordered myself a third one. Man, this is an issue. Literally, I'm spending money on so much money on solar. It is addictive as hell. Like, guys, really, if you're trying to do that, be calm, please. Be calm to yourself, because it is really addictive. As soon as you do see your device running, hashing for free with sun, it is magnificent. I'm sorry, I'm just being stupid.
Share your bad experience as well. Tell them what you broke. What did you burn?
What did I broke? So far nothing.
Yeah, you did.
What?
What did you burn?
Oh, yeah, funny thing. Be sure, if you ever try to do that, don't use these small crocodile clip cables for 12 volts at 6 amps. That's not going to work. They will burn. And it was smelling really bad. I mean, luckily I was trying this outside in the garden, not in the inside, because otherwise I probably would have burned down my house. So be aware, electricity is always an issue, especially electric is not the issue. The issue is the amperage that you put through a cable. And cables do have a rating, 12 gauge, 13 gauge, whatever you name it. These are ratings that you should be looking up and then use these ratings for the appropriate cable that you're trying to do. So for the hex, as an example, you would need something like 12 volts, 6 amps. That's what you're going to pull for the Bitaxe, because the Bitaxe will start, and in the early phase of heating up, it will only use something between 4 to 5 amps. But as soon as it hits its sweet spot at like 60 degrees Celsius, it gets a little bit higher, like 6.5, 7 amps. That's what it is using. This is physics.
So you need a 10 amp cable. You need to give yourself some overhead.
Yeah,
So
you need to give yourself an overhead. It's the same.
I'll take amps.
It's the same as with your outlet. There is this 80-20 rule. You do have an outlet that is rated for, like, let's say 3,600 watts. You don't want to actually use 3,600 watts. You want to use 3,400 at a maximum to maintain 20% of a buffer. It's really important that you keep that in mind.
Yeah, make it easy for people. If it's 1,000 watt supply, don't pull more than 800 continuous.
Correct.
You can spot 1,000. Some will go even higher for seconds, but for longevity and stability, 800 out of 1,000.
So,
Keep
but
yourself safe.
let's
So,
get a little bit back into the section of why it wouldn't actually work to use Bitaxe with just two capacitors as an example, and then a solar array. I mean, so we talked about it that you do need a buffer, and this buffer you basically need for almost everything. You do have your solar panel, and it will not produce all day long 80 watts. If you do take my 100-watt solar panel that I do have, this is like a peak rating in the laboratory with perfect conditions and the perfect angle and stuff like this. You will never reach that because you do live at different locations, so take at least 20% of the highest rating off or even more, and then you do have the value that it can actually reach. The highest that I have ever seen coming into my MPPT charge controller was 82 watts from this 100-watt solar panel, and I needed to play really that much with the angle that I do use. Initially, I had it lent against a wall, which wasn't really that well, and then I lowered the angle to actually have like more of this 30-degree
and
angle to the sun.
after you finish the 30-degree angle, you got on your knees and you pray to the sun gods for like an hour of sun.
Oh yeah, that's really important. This actually helps praying to the sun gods, definitely.
Do you remember how many times? I mean, that's one of the reasons I went down the tracker route, trying to use a tracker to actually follow the sun and optimize, at least to eliminate. Because you saw yourself when you were here with me and we were testing, and plus what you just said with the angle on the wall, a few degrees took away like, I don't know, 10-20% of the panel's power, right?
Yeah, at least.
So yeah, so I mean, now imagine if you're even more angled, it gets even worse. And that was the philosophy behind going through the little tracker, to basically try and gain that loss that I have with my fixed panels on the roof, that I do in the big, because I could see that in the morning with the low angles, it's hugely different.
Yeah, and
Um,
that is just the issue of getting actually enough power into your solar panel, into your circuit that you do have. Now we're sitting at this point of, all right, your MPPT controller is doing his work and is maintaining a voltage on the output, but you need some way to store in between energy, because if you don't and there's a cloud coming along, your voltage is going to drop and your output wattage that you can actually draw from this device is also dropping, and at a certain point your Bitaxe will shut off. So just using a capacitor wouldn't be enough. Actually, you need a battery in between, because sometimes you do have clouds that are sitting there for 15 minutes, and how the heck are you going to maintain your device with a small capacitor for 15 minutes? That's
well,
not going to work.
let's think about it the other way. Let's be the devil's advocate, because I know what Scott's thinking right now. But say we're solo mining on this machine. You experience with me, it's not like, so we have two major parameters that we had issues with. One was maximizing the efficiency of the panel with a given sun that we have at that moment. Okay, so say we have 100 watts of sunlight coming in. Are we making 100 because the panel is facing the right way? So that's one parameter. So maybe a solution is a tracker to eliminate that problem. But then we have a secondary problem, which sometimes we don't actually get the supply of sun, which is like what you saw here. The sun was in and out every 3 or 4 seconds, okay, at different levels of power. So even if we track the sun the best way we can, you will get times where when we run the test my weekend, would you say it was 50%, 50-50, where we had sun and 50% it was shady?
Yeah, at
Because what
least
I'm
it was a
that
shame.
when the sun does come out at that point, my little panel on the tracker, didn't have enough power output to make up on the battery to charge it again for what it lost over those 5 minutes of cloudiness that it was used. Yes, it had enough and maybe half an amp extra from what the Bitaxe was pulling, but it wasn't certainly enough to bring the battery back to what it was before the clouds came out. So as you noticed, we were constantly losing the war. Yes, we were running for 6 hours, but maybe if we had a 30-watt panel on that tracker, maybe we could have gone 9-10 hours because we wouldn't have been losing the battery. We would have been able to run the miner plus charge at a good level when we
Yeah,
have.
and there another factor is also counting into that. Like you do have this tracker device, which also uses electricity to actually move the panel. So you do have a second source that is actually occasionally pulling power in order to maintain the right angle to the sun, because the sun, or
Yes,
the,
it's
the,
got to
the
make
sun
everything.
orientation is moving for us. Basically, I mean, we are moving as a planet, but yeah,
Everything's moving, man. But this is where we have to start thinking outside the box, because Scott just wrote in the comments again the same thing. The idea of the MHPT is to scale hash power. I'm totally with you, Scott. And this is what I was discussing with Lars. We're always going to be behind the curve. The moment we're going to instruct the miner to shift, say we crack the way of actually changing the hash rate instantly. Say we could go from 490 meg down to like 50 meg in 1 second, okay, for argument's sake, and nothing crashes, and up again the same way. Um, we still need, we're always going to be behind the curve. So somebody's got to tell us the power's out. We can't be expecting to see the voltage lines drop out from power before we take any action. So it'll be an MPPT or it'll be whatever. We'll be saying, oh, okay, I'm losing power. Command the software to drop the hash rate. This is the part that we need to start figuring out. We need to start running tests. I don't know if there's people, because
I
I don't
mean,
have skill.
there's already an implementation, and that's also a shout out here to PMAXUW, who created the Pi miner, the QX, and plenty more. He has written the Pi miner. So this is basically a mining software written in Python, and in there is also the ability to actually live change the frequency of your device, actually ramping up and ramping down the
That's
hash
that's
rate.
one step. But uh, we have two issues here. One is actually what you said, that the QX, for example, does on the PyMiner, where without restarting, you can do it. I spoke to Ben and Scott, and basically the question was, um, it's written, or you said it to me as well, it's written on a different part of the memory. We need to move it, right? To avoid the restart. The
Yeah, the
big question
Bitix,
is not,
so just to get a little bit more nerdy here, so the Bitix currently does have something called an NVS, which is a non-volatile storage, and in there is currently the value for the frequency of the ASIC chip stored. In order to change this non-volatile storage, because the name is program, it is non-volatile, you need to restart the device, which
yeah.
is, for the current sake of using that, just not possible to actually live change the frequency. So you need to move that out of the NVS into a variable that you can actually change live on the system, which is, in basic terms, as we programmers lovely or developers always love to say, it's just a 5-minute task. No, it takes a little bit more time than that. But yeah, that's broken down really the simple steps that you actually need to change to achieve that. That's one thing of many other things that
I
you also
think,
would need to do.
I think
But you pointed out a great thing about it. Still, then we are always behind. Like the sun is being shaded with a cloud or something like that. We are still behind. We are then clocking down the chip, so we are still using way too much power. So we would shut off the device because it's trying to use more power than what's available. So there's not really a solution for that issue. Like maybe you need a solar panel in the middle, which is basically providing the actual power for your device, and then you need some sort of photoresistors around it to actually catch 1 or 2 seconds before it hits the panel from which orientation is probably a cloud coming, and then you can try to
we have that. We have the
pre-downgrade the
photoresistors
hash rate.
tracking.
Huh?
We've got 4 photoresistors doing exactly that, tracking the sun angle. That's how I turn the
Yeah,
tracker
that's
head.
that's for tracking the sun angle. You could also
Yeah,
extend
but
them
they
in
get
all.
values.
Yeah, yeah, you can
I
just
mean,
all
I'm getting
extend
the
them.
raw values, and they're making out numbers. So I'm basically comparing the numbers. You could say, well, if this number disappears instantly, then, but it'll be different. I don't know. The question is, can the boys make the hash rate go from 0 to 0 in under 1 second without destroying something?
Yeah,
And
no.
going
So
back,
there's
there's no
probably
point
a
waiting for
reason.
4 minutes
I
for
mean,
it to
there
ramp
is.
up, because
So
it could be
wait, wait,
10,
wait, wait, wait,
15
wait. There's probably a reason why Bitmain takes so long to actually ramp up these devices, especially for those of you who are using something like Brains. or some other
Sure.
software,
But
if you're
why?
trying to crank up these devices, they take a couple of minutes
They
sometimes.
take 10 minutes. They're not sometimes. Mine take from start to they get to full 485. They'll take 6 7 minutes, and before I see them stabilize. My question is, we need to have. We can't assume. I mean, my electronics background will tell me is like, well, it's 3.5 kilowatts of power. They can't just go on off. I mean, the majority of any solid state circuit that's going to be dumped with 3.6 kilowatts and so many amps is going to have a very hard time or a very low life expectancy on its contacts. So is it because we have a lot of power on the rails, we're ramping up slowly on the Bitmain because we want to avoid issues with such currents? Or is it something else? Because if it's a power issue, physically, like we're trying to step up the power supply to dump from 100 watts to 3.6K, or is it the physical chip's got an issue? Because if it's just the power supply issue, well, we don't have that problem. We're playing with like an amp at 0.2 volts for one chip. Can we try and send it 0 to 0 within half a second and see what it does? I mean, I don't have the skills to do that on a firmware or software level. Um,
McFarlane is pointing out something good in the chat. They also probably want to avoid thermal shocks, which is
yes,
definitely a thing. I mean,
I
so
agree. But thermal shock on the board, that each hash board that's packing 1 kilowatt of power, or the chip that's producing, I don't know,
no, we're
half.
talking about the chip because that's really an issue. I have tried, or we have multiple times, we have shipped chips, ASIC chips from Canada over to Germany here to solder them onto, and some of them cracked during the flight, probably due to temperature issues or temperature
Well,
differences.
it's not that cold. It's controlled as well. You might have 10C difference. That's not going to make a difference.
I mean, you don't know. Like these chips, especially some of these chips, are really, really fragile.
Yeah, probably banging the ceramic would probably work, I don't think. But I'm just curious, can we? I mean, I'm happy to pay to sacrifice a chip. Can somebody change the code to say go from 0 to hero in like 1 second and see what it does?
Yeah, we,
Yeah, I
we,
will.
we already done that. It
Then you
works.
dunk it in the immersion tank.
It
What,
works.
you went in 1 second, you ramped the frequency up?
Yeah, sure, it works.
Oh, okay.
I mean, okay, so the best and easiest solutions for you would be to actually get yourself a QX and then change the PyMiner software. And in there, you can actually just change the values. I mean, PMAX, Prmax, I'm just gonna call you Prmax now, whatever. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong, but you can literally just change the code to get the ASIC chip from 0 to hero as he expressed here in like 1 second. That's totally possible, yeah. And it would work. The thing is, as MacFighter pointed out, it's just a thing of we probably want to maintain a thermal increasement over time to not get them into a thermal shock of the actual chip and therefore avoiding them to crack them. And let's see, Scott wrote something. It's my
Yeah.
understanding that the main issue is the on-chip PLL. It cannot change frequency instantly. Furthermore, with a big chain of chips, it's very important that all the chips remain perfectly balanced. Yeah, correct. That's also another thing. Like in this process currently right now, we're just talking about one single chip, but it becomes way more complicated if we do add up more to the chain.
I think at this stage, my FAFO request is for the eventual day miner, which will be, as we said, dump it in the field, 120-watt panel with a miner attached at the back of it on a tripod or whatever, on a peg or on a stake. Um, one Bitaxe. I mean, we're not going to be looking for a hex or a QX or a XX, whatever, on one of these field miners for now. I'm just want to say one Bitaxe, one chip, one tiny power supply. Can we hammer it from 0 to hero and up and down multiple times and with a big heatsink? I mean, from thermal point, we'll stick it in an immersion tank to see whether it's a heating issue that's restraining it or something else detonates inside. We can try and eliminate sort of the thermal concerns or the big power concerns because we're playing with one chip with very low power. We just want to see physically, can the die take it? Uh, is
I mean,
somebody up for that?
for one chip, I'd say yeah, totally. It's going to be possible, but
I don't know. We
not
need
for
to
a
find out.
chain where you're trying to maintain a balance between all these chips.
Someone
That's
can
the
try
issue.
that. Then we can use
I
that
mean,
panel.
think about it. Let's think about it. Like you do have 100 chips in series. And if you have any imbalance in between, you can literally fry them up in less than a second. If you do power up your Bitaxe without a heatsink, it takes actually 2 seconds and the ASIC chip is dead. That's it. So having imbalanced on your hash board is one of the biggest issues.
I'm not disagreeing that. I'm just saying for the sake of going forward for us with the R&D of the future day miner or the field independent miner, whatever, we want to avoid batteries. Okay, well, we could get a big cap, but we would need to be able to control the crap out of the Bitaxe's up and down speeds.
Yeah. And as Scott pointed out earlier, H&P is already working on an implementation for that, at least of my knowledge. I mean, H&P, please correct if something changed. But yeah, I mean, we will get there,
Run some
hopefully.
examples.
It's a slow process. We are an open source community, and everybody just works whenever they do have time. I mean, not everybody. Scott needs to work 24/7, like 365, period. There's no, Scott, you need to work always, literally. Yeah, just saying that. All right, but yeah, so you do get the point. Like, talking about solar and changing things is, in easy terms, limited. And as we do try to add more things as like frequency changes and actually using the sun, it gets complicated. And yeah, you're totally right. I experienced this firsthand with my current setup. And I'm trying to make a video about this in the next couple of days to actually get more people into this solar section, because I hope that we get more intelligent people into this community that are trying to tinker around, and why not fuck around and find out? FO or whatever.
Oh, you got to always FAFO in order to.
FAFO, yeah, there we go. Sorry.
I'm thinking at some point the solar tracker, maybe. I'm a bit of a noob on GitHub and I'm still figuring it out. But is there a way somehow on GitHub I can? I'm going to sound ridiculous now for not knowing this, but if I put the solar tracker on the GitHub, is there a way that project on GitHub can collab with a version of ESP Miners GitHub to go and do this testing with? First of all, I also need to know what kind of input or output you need from the control circuits from the tracker to tell you to shut down or do what. Somebody needs to tell me that, a software guy from the Bitaxe team.
Yeah, that's probably a whole different topic. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that.
Point. Yeah, I mean, as you said, now let's mess around with the firmware a bit and see about ramping it up and
down. But no, you're totally right about it. So making a new change to the firmware
for now.
No, wait. Listen. So making a change to the firmware and actually getting it doing a couple of different things is totally easy. I mean, I did it with my thesis that I was writing.
Easy for you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's not really that easy if you're not into software development. Sure, I do get it. But yeah, it's always like for you or anybody else who's listening to that, coming in here and asking questions like that is totally appreciated and highly encouraged, because we want more people to work on stuff like that. But yeah, we will figure this out and we will get there. But time is moving on. We're currently sitting at 53 minutes in here, and I want to talk about a couple other topics as well, if you don't mind. Or do you have anything else to say about solar?
No, I'm good. I mean, we've got the lightning thing.
Yeah. Now we're getting into a section. So for those of you who didn't know that, we do have a new channel, which is a lightning channel under general. Because, apparently you can run your devices on pools such as Ocean and get your payouts with Lightning, specifically with a Bolt 12 offer. And Lightning itself is a complete new topic. And not new in terms of it's new, but in terms of it adds up a new era of complexity to everything around it. Especially if you're getting into mining and then trying to get out your payouts with Lightning. This is not as easy as it might think to be. I mean, you could do it with Brains, and I'm sorry that I'm saying that, but to be honest, with Brains, it's super simple. You just mine to this proxy pool of Brains, proxy, and then you get your payouts in Lightning to your desired Lightning address. But it's different with Ocean because they are not trying to be your proxy and they are not being your custodian, because payouts are instantly when a block is found, yada yada. So it's a complete different section of how you actually get payouts and how your payouts are going to be maintained or calculated. So therefore, this adds up
Yeah.
new complexity. And yeah, you, Cryptoized, you also tried to get yourself into Lightning and figured out, man, that's not as
Well,
easy as it seems to be, right?
as I admit, I am a complete noob when it comes to the software kind of side of Bitcoin. So I decided after playing with, I mean, I've spent the last 6 months, I built multiple nodes. I built that node from DVTV. I figured out the fundamentals, but I said, okay, hardware enough. Now it's time to take a dive into the rabbit hole. I want to get Lightning used. I've got some test money on Ocean that I've been testing bits and bobs and hash rates and all sorts of stuff. I thought, okay, well, that's a good opportunity. Let's dive down the rabbit hole and figure out this Lightning. Holy shit, it's the true rabbit hole. But I had a rant the second day of being into this rabbit hole. I blew my gasket. But I'm starting to get it. I think I'm scratched the surface, but it's sort of starting to make sense. Now, I'm on a huge road of discovery here, and I thought I'd share it with you whilst we're all here. So I've got a node up and running. I've finally got a node up and running, and I've actually opened. I'm going to make it public. My node's public. I'm going to share it. Well, what I wanted to do is I wanted to see if anybody else wants to come along for the ride, the roller coaster. And in the process, it's apparently needed that you have a lot of channels open, which is like these connections between peers. The more we have, the more access we can get to the mass of the network. Anyway, I took upon myself, I've made a node, I've published it. I'm going to make it public to everyone. If anybody's coming on board on this crazy journey of Lightning and is either in Lightning already or is about to get into Lightning or whatever, and you build your node or do whatever, you're welcome to connect to me. So I'm going to make the node public. I said to Moncler as well that I think he's going to make one as well. Now, and I've opened the channel to the biggest node that's on the network, ASIC, whatever it's called. And I've opened it with 400,000 sats. So I put 400,000 sats on that channel so we can have access in and out. And now what I'm saying to people, if you got a connection and you want, send it to me, and I'm happy to open a cross channel back to you. And help sort of the OSMU BTC Tech Nerd Army sort of have its first footprint as our own little, not centralized, but start our own. I mean, I'm happy to be the first node that's got a connection to the outside world, and then everybody can start connecting. And then
It's good to hear
also
your first
connect.
impressions of your journey with Lightning. I mean, Lightning itself is basically, terms speaking about it, it's like an off-chain of Bitcoin. So taking transactions into another another
Yeah,
section of how to
it's
actually process them, not on-chain, but just using on-chain transactions for opening and closing channels to have like, yeah,
it's
basically
an
a term
interesting
of,
subject.
yeah, it's
Because
an
often
interesting subject. And that's the
I asked for the
reason
channel to open,
that's the reason why
and
we do have this new channel called Lightning, in
yeah,
order to actually discuss all these things. But it's not as easy to get into there. We do have, or there are plenty of videos out on YouTube which actually show you how to use it. But even then, you do have different implementations, such as Core Lightning. You have LND. Some of them are not working together. Uh,
yeah.
some offer
I
other
posted a video.
features, and so on.
I put a video for you in the Lightning channel. It's 1 hour long, and I said on the top, I tagged it. It's a must watch. I would say I saw 20, 30 videos, maybe more. This 1 hour particular, I put it on the TV on YouTube with a beer, and it was extremely insightful. Um, it's fairly technical at the end, but the first quarter of the video is very, very insightful of analogies of how the whole thing works and um, what you need to understand. And it made total sense for me. After that, it was like, okay, now it's starting to make sense. Um,
All right, that's great to hear.
Trial. Yeah, no, everybody who's going to get on this bandwagon or go down the rabbit hole must watch that. Make that 1 hour effort. Um, and then I was just rewind when I was setting everything up. And now I've got my own node. It's public. I had to open my Unify, my server, my firewall was going absolutely nuts. All this Tor attacks. He was saying Tor attack, Tor attack. I had to disable some of the Tor attack stuff, thinking it's going mad. And now I've got multiple peers, multiple connections, and it's public as well, so it's on
Yeah,
the
the
one.
bad thing about Lightning is to actually get this up and running on your own or at home on your own hardware is not as easy as just downloading an app from your app store and then having your custodial wallet that somebody else is actually maintaining. But no, if you actually want to go into OPSEC or whatever you call it and have the control about your funds is more complicated than just downloading an app and setting an app
Yeah,
in
it's 3 or 4
2 seconds.
apps. 3 or 4. I would say if there was, I can help someone get to my stage in 30 minutes. Not explain it to them, but set it up from scratch. So it's not that hard. Um, the
Yeah, but
bots will solve.
you need to get over this stage of okay, now I understand how this actually works, and that's the reason why I wanted to point out that we now do have this Lightning channel to get more people into this session or into this section of Bitcoin of actually understanding this. Because I mean, you're totally right about it. 1 week earlier, you were crying all day long about man, how stupid and how ununderstandable is this bullshit, and now you said no, it's not that hard. You just need to
No,
get into
because
it.
there is very little and if any information online, and things are moving. But I mean, I went to Umbro's website to have a look at the wallet stuff to connect with the node, and the CLN sort of documentation was talking about the Linux version, like without the UI. And I was like, well, how the hell is that any fucking use to me when I'm sitting there staring at the UI with the noob version with all the click buttons, and you're sitting there telling me what code to type into the terminal so I can get it to do specific functions. I was like, what the hell? And the date last updated 2 years ago. I was like, well, how the hell is that of any use? Okay, or
Yeah,
like the
it's not always that
any
simple.
mention about the mobile. So if they had, I mean, now I figured it out myself the hard way. I was like, oh, well, that wasn't hard. I mean, if somebody told me to click here and copy this and put it there, then it would have made sense. But uh, maybe we'll document something, or maybe we'll do one of your series and stuff, like a basic intro to set up something simple. Whatever, we'll figure something out. But anyway,
Yeah,
we've got
we
the
will definitely figure something out.
channels up. If anybody's got Lightning and they want to connect, hit me up.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
that
don't know.
that's a great expression of actually getting you started onto Lightning, and hopefully maybe we can encourage other people to actually also get started with Lightning. I do hope so. Uh,
Well, this started when we put that bet. Remember when you did the live stream and I put the 10 sat bet that you're gonna rip off a temperature sensor? What were you ripping up? The Brains machine or the other Avalon thing? When you were trying to, yeah,
yeah,
when
yeah,
you were
the
with
Avalon one. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, when you were probing with Scott, I was like putting bets in chat that your solder iron is gonna slip and you're gonna whack that temperature sensor.
By the
But
way, I'm still waiting for these 10 sets.
sure, now I've got the channel open. I'm happy to send it to you.
Yeah, I hope
So
so.
yeah, yeah.
Whatever.
Well,
All
I'm up
right.
and running now.
Wait. We're now sitting over 1 hour. I think it's now time to actually get the town hall today closed and actually ramp everything up. Uh, yeah, it was a great talk today. A little bit of conspiracy theory about the BM1370 and how it actually or might be looking. So we will figure this out hopefully next couple of weeks to understand how this is working or what is different from this to the older chips that we have seen and that we have used on all these Bitaxe derivatives that we do have. And yeah, let's see. Maybe we will see a new Bitaxe version in the next couple of weeks/months. Who knows? I mean, the stage from the S21 was released, and then we had the Bitaxe Supra. Was Scott? Was it like 3 weeks, 4 weeks? Super insanely fast. And we see as soon as these S21 Pros are shipped and we get one on our hand, we will actually also figure this out. It shouldn't be that hard or that complicated to figure this new chip out as well. That's my assumption. But yeah, then we also talk a little bit about solar, which is just great, and it adds in plenty of issues or critical parts that you need to be aware of, as always with electricity, especially if you're trying to maintain a certain power draw from something like your Bitaxe. And then it becomes a little bit more complex, but it is doable, I'd say. And lastly, yeah, we just talked a little bit about Lightning. There's not really that much else going on. We do have a little bit of conversations in the Bitcoin section. So the control board replacement for S19 XPs and above. So the Bitcoin itself is basically working a functional device. Maybe we'll also see a little bit of improvement on this one in the future as well, hopefully. But we have plenty of projects and plenty of channels. I think that was a great town hall today. I thank everybody for tuning in here and listening to today. And for all those of you who are listening to this later on, thank you for listening to this. I do hope that you will join into this in 2 weeks back again and listening to all this nerdy stuff that we're talking about here. Till then, I wish everybody of you a great day. Have a nice time. Remember to go outside because outside is nice. And till then, thanks for being here and see you next time. Bye bye.